what we've outlined in there is a lot of the SRF and permitting requirements that have been outlined just to make sure that we, address them as necessary. We also put in the basically extended timelines and shortened timelines for the hydrogeo report and the groundwater discharge permit, just so we can get an understanding. I think that leads to some of the things we've been talking about as following the DEP standards to make sure that we follow those shorter timelines, as opposed to, asking for things outside of the box that could increase the review times. So
yes, absolutely.
So that's the majority of it. And then design schedule milestones. Obviously, the big one is the SRF. And then I know Jackie and I have talked about getting a little more specific for you guys to understand when, and again, this is probably getting in the weeds with not in front of you, but to understand when phase one will be fully connected, most likely when phase two would be fully connected, when you may need to, change buildings or demolish buildings in the area potentially, when some of those things might happen down the road. So you all have a better understanding.
And I think, so what we'll do is try and pull together that document, understanding that if we give them the full document, there's going to be a lot of it that will change because you're projecting out into construction. And so
right.
That probably just from between now and approvals is really what we want to be focusing on. But thank you, that'll help.
Yeah.
I just wasn't sure. We have so many copies circulating. I'm not sure which one is the most up to date.
Yeah, and I can send, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, I can send an updated copy that'll have like a note on what date it was printed.
That would be great. That would be very helpful. Yes, Steve.
Well, we've been talking about a critical path schedule for 4 or 5 months now, and we saw an inkling of it about 3 months ago.
Yeah.
And nothing since. I think there is one out there because obviously we saw a picture of it at one of the meetings. I just look at, and I'll give you an example. What some of my concerns is project cost estimate for the town meeting, January of 25. Does that include both estimates? Because there's supposed to be 2 estimates going on together. Are they consolidated and reviewed together at that point? Has it been a value engineering
Wait a
meeting?
minute, both estimates for what?
Yeah.
30% design documents.
Collection end.
Right. You need an estimate for your meeting.
Yes.
On projected costs. That's shown in the schedule is occurring in January right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's supposed to be based upon the 30% design development documents.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Which are going to be completed in February now, not December.
So when we last met, not the meeting that we had today, but the prior Tuesday, the date did get shifted from December to January. So seeing it in February, I haven't really honed in on that yet.
So I think what we had talked about was, so the meeting for, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong with any of this, but I think your meeting is in May 1st-ish. And what we talked about was, I think there's like a drop dead date of April 1st or something like that. But we are looking to still provide, based on the data that we have, still stick with that. I think January, actually I do have this in front of me, the January 25th date, to give you something updated. So there, just for everyone's information, with the PEF that got submitted in July, there was an estimate that was provided on the opinion of probable construction costs. And as we go through the design project, we'll just be updating that probable, opinion of probable construction costs along the way. I know a lot of the things we're talking about in our office, and I'm sure Jackie Tupper's talking about them too, is the effects of BABA requirements on the costs and just the current bidding climate. So we've got, a team that's, looking at all those things to make sure that we can update the costs accordingly for the town.
Okay, but
So I guess my question was, GHD is supposed to do a cost estimate. Environmental Partners is supposed to do a cost estimate. The two would be reconciled together so that everybody's on the same page as far as the cost. And there's also supposed to be a value engineering meeting occurring based upon that cost estimate if we're not within the budget at that point. That's the kind of information that kind of lacks in what we're getting here, which I would assume would be clearer in the CPM schedule or not.
and that should happen, ladies, between February and April 1st.
I don't.
Yeah, am I able to share my
Yeah.
screen? Can the team, I mean, again, I don't want to get into the weeds, but I can share my screen with the more critical path schedule that you're talking about.
That's the bigger schedule that we looked at the last meeting.
Yeah, I
With
guess
arrows and-
I would just think we need to get it to them. I mean, do you want to go into details of it when it's not in front of you?
No, but I think if it was in front of us, we'd understand it.
I think Lauren can give you a brief overview of it,
Yeah.
and she can share that with
Okay.
us.
Okay.
Would you
Just
mind,
me-
Lauren? I'm sorry. I
No,
know I
oh
was-
no, I don't mind.
Just so you can
Uh,
see it, because there were a lot of arrows and colors and.
Bear with me because I have not used Zoom in a while. Okay. Okay, can you guys see my screen with the schedule on it? Hopefully.
Oh, we can see the screen.
Yeah, it doesn't
I know-
look like how it looked the other, I think you need to make it bigger. So we can
Yeah,
see
I
all the
know.
arrows.
Man, how do I make it?
No.
Actually, okay. Bear with me 1 second. I'm going to open a different file in a PDF so then I can make it bigger for everybody.
Because there's a lot more on that schedule than is on this schedule.
Yeah, this is the,
Yeah, I haven't figured out in Microsoft Project how to, I can make this bigger, but I can't make this section bigger, and I'm not exactly sure why.
Lauren, if you also want to email it to me, I can just print it for everyone.
Okay.
I don't know if that's easier.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay. Let me get to that page. Hopefully this one is the most up to date. I think it is. So I guess what you'll see when we do send, and I can send it in a couple minutes to print it out, but hopefully you can see it somewhat better now. So this is some of the critical path schedule for the wastewater treatment plant design. We had received the flows and loads at the end of October. So we were in somewhat of a holding pattern before that point, just so our staff didn't get mobilized and really, waste time on work that wasn't exactly relative to the phases that you had worked out with EP or Apex. I'm going to get that right at some point. So the 30% basis of design report, we're starting to work on all those items right now. We've been sharing a draft memo of flows and loads based on the water data that EP put together. And we're actually just finalizing that memo right now with basically an extra spot that we wanted to make sure had the potential to be sewered and included in the treatment plant. So that informs, the 30% basis of design. So we do admit that the schedule is pretty tight. So right after we submit the 30% basis of design, Jackie and her team will have a couple weeks to review, and then we will shortly thereafter have the 30% design workshop for that value add. I think there was 30 and 60% design. But our team is probably still going to be going strong and try to incorporate any input or changes as we go along to be able to stick to the schedule to meet the SRF deadline. And then again, like as you mentioned, there'll be a 60% design review. Same thing. The OPM will have the opportunity to review the documents at that point, all the drawings and specifications that we have ready. Again, we'll have another workshop. This will be approximately in July. And then there will be another value engineering time period for anything that can be addressed there. And what we're really striving for is this SRF submittal design shortly after the 60%. We're really focused on meeting this October 15th deadline to make sure that the town will be able to receive funding for the project. And then that's when a lot of the other permits and whatnot come into play when this submittal is completed. And you'll kind of see, and when you get the file, a lot of the rest of the schedule is just a lot of the permitting that has to be submitted, both for the town yourself and as well as Mass DEP and other entities. And then moving on from that, starting into 2026, there'll be a 90% design submittal review, and we'll get into final design probably the early part of March. When we get our draft, once we finalize this pre-qualification bidding and construction schedule, we'll see if that can change, sooner or a little later, depending on that, because Massachusetts has a number of requirements to be able to get a contractor on board. So I guess from a design, and this is obviously the wastewater treatment plant, Jackie and her team are working on the collection system. So this, and we can include that. I have some stuff on here for a collection system, but looking, to get a little more info from Jackie on that, so we can have one, I guess, cohesive schedule, which is probably easiest for you guys. So yeah, oh, go ahead.
Well, just a question on the submittal to the SRF in October of 25. That's only at 60%. Is there a requirement to resubmit after 90%, assuming there's like some changes, and then do they then have another lag before they get back to us? I'm just wondering about various ways that you could lose a month or two.
You can't, SRF is pretty steady, so if we hit their targets, they will hit our targets.
Okay.
But yes.
Do they require a resubmittal after you get the final thing done, and they could come back and say, well, you've now given us the final, it looks a little different than the 60%, therefore. I'm just wondering about ways.
We haven't had that problem with water.
I just.
On SRF, the funding, the fund would be
DEP.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I
That's
think
the point is having DEP in on all these meetings so that they're moving with us, so that we're not,
and the
Right.
submittal has enough contingency built in that if the numbers shift a little bit, we're still okay.
So that's design and construction. Again, we still need to refine the construction numbers, or dates, I mean. And so what you'll see when and I think I actually, I think I did, just to keep things a little bit more streamlined, I minimized the extended review from DEP. So there's the two main DEP submittals relative, and I'll scroll up a little bit, relative to the hydro-geo report that we are actively working on right now, and the groundwater discharge permit submittal. So that one actually can't start until we submit to SRF. So that's where that, October start date happens. But what I wanted to show was and this is just what's posted in DEP's on DEP's website, but the non-typical report submittal obviously can extend out. It looks like about a year. Similarly for the groundwater discharge permit. So that's why, we've been working with I guess both Jackie's and Hillary and everybody on staying within the typical ranges for certain things that DEP is requiring for the treatment plant and the recharge beds. So what our aim is to stay within this typical hydrogeological evaluation report submittal to, generally follow these dates. And I guess for Rich, who I think is sitting over there, it looks like we were looking to have the report submission sometime in January. So that one's probably our most imminent, other than the memo, probably our most imminent milestone date that we're looking at. So yeah, I guess a little history on that. This involves a lot of groundwater modeling that you might have seen in some of the previous reports that have been put together. So we're working on different scenarios of recharge at the DPW facility and the Children's Place / Balwick Ave facility, whatever we want to call that, to be able to present in this report and present a path forward for the town. So again, there's a lot of permitting in here. There's a lot of, feel free if there's other dates on the Eastham permits. I probably should talk with someone at some point to make sure we have all these nailed down as to when you need them. And then obviously our SRF funding milestones.
Thank you, Lauren.
You're welcome.
I know walking us through the schedule wasn't on today's agenda, but I appreciate it.
No problem. It's a lot. There's a lot on there. But yeah, it's just helpful to see all the different permits, and we can roll up things as necessary to be able to keep track for everybody.
So do you want to go first or you want me to? Rich and I had a I'm a little jittery over there. Rich and I had a meeting on Friday with Peter and Fred, just to talk about, I think I wanted to step back and talk about some concerns that I know you probably have about the whole project in general, but specifically around timeline and time management, because we know that we have a shortened timeline anyway. So we are definitely asking the consultants to work faster than they normally would on this project right now. And however, I think what we haven't been very successful, and it's our fault in sharing with you, is sort of all the stuff that is happening behind the scenes that we really honestly can't be a part of, because it's a team of people at GHD designing the treatment plant. It's Jackie and Ziad and a team of people at EPG looking at the collection system and the whole mounding tests and all of those things that we've been doing, or GHD has been doing, to try and get that collection area, what do we call the disposal? The recharge area within DEP parameters. And as Lauren was saying, if it goes out of DEP parameters and we ask for any special, we'll do, what is it, 9 rather than 7, or
Yeah.
rather than 5, or whatever we were talking about in terms of how much discharge we can put in, or recharge we can discharge into that
The loading
area.
rate.
Yeah. Then we'll have special permitting criteria for that. And we don't want that, because that really will add a full calendar year. Now, that's why we have the Children's Place kind of still being studied as our secondary site, definitely for phase 2, but not for phase 1 right now. But we're moving those things along too. So anyway, we met, and I just wanted to kind of catch the rest of you up, because I think this is how sometimes we get into trouble too, is I'm assuming we're moving forward and we're assuming everything's fine, and things aren't fine because people are really worried about things, worried about whatever. So I wanted to have a chance to kind of get on the same page. We need to get you the information that you need. I know we haven't been successful at that. We're trying to get everything onto the website, and we can easily, are those internal documents for our internal weekly meetings? Could those go on the website too, Richard? Should they just,
But I give them to
the committee, we can send them out. So we can just send those out to you, because now, GHD and EPG and the town has a standing meeting with every week. Just, sometimes it's a half an hour, sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more, but it's just basically to make sure we're staying on all the targets. And everyone's reminded of anything they needed to do, including us, to follow up on
And
things.
we really only had, back in October, I think it was, we had a site walk with GHD and EP, which was informative to help move this forward. And then since then, and starting in November, we started these weekly meetings. And that's been helpful to keep everybody on track on things we need to do. And so I have a couple things, I think I have just enough copies. So what I've been doing, from those meetings, I missed the one last week. So it was a little bit of a hold. Let me just pass these down.
They're on
One
records.
for each. But, so those are my notes, and what I do is I take these notes and I distribute them to our team internally, and then the action items. And, so I want to show you that and tell you some of the things that we've done. And also, the reason I'm telling you that, because then that's where your input is gonna be necessary, I think, with some of these items. So for example, Hillary has some communications with some, property owners abutting a wetland. That needs to be tested, and so we need access to the property. So that's one of the action items that was on my project notes. John roughly had to do some considerations of the DPW site, so he had a couple action items. I had some things to do to follow up with John and to follow up with Jackie on different things. And a lot of that was about citing. And so you'll see in my notes, kind of those action items kind of on the side that I make sure that we follow up on. And also included in that was one of the deliverables was, the draft from GHD of their flows and loads memo. So now you have that. And that was important. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, Lauren or Jackie. But the promising news we have today as the update on that
Awesome.
is that,
Finally.
you know, kind of what we thought when we did the site walk, is that we're hoping that we can get all the recharge just at the DPW site, as opposed to having to spread it over 2 different sites, which obviously
For
would be.
phase one.
And
And
maybe
potentially phase 2.
potentially phase
Oh,
2.
wow.
Yeah.
And so the layout of the site and the layout of the plant and the layout of the sand beds.
Yeah.
You know, we gotta do all that thinking now so that we don't, you know, preclude ourselves from being able to fit all that on the site later on for phase 2. So a little bit of due diligence and effort now would save us some, hopefully, time, effort, and cost in the future.
What was the recharge rate that they figured it on?
5,
5?
which is the DEP standard.
Okay.
But the interesting thing is that once we have it up and running with phase 1, we could potentially go to 7 or 9, once we have data that shows what it's
Yeah, you can
actually doing.
renegotiate.
So you can go back
So
and
that'd be
it-
helpful for phase 2.
exactly.
Exactly, but it won't help us now, but it will.
Yeah.
You can
And
do
then 5
everything
is,
in one.
then I
in
have
one
5
More
what,
in one space.
beds or?
No,
If you can't,
5,
you'd
what's
have
the
to-
Then-
What's the
measurement?
measurement,
Discharge?
guys? What's the 5? What's the measurement, Hill?
Oh, 5, oh my
Sorry.
gosh, gallons per day per square foot.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's
Yeah,
the
and it's
same.
not a guarantee. Obviously, the DEP still has to approve it, but the mounding level that we saw today based on our modeling results was very promising. It was very close to the range that they're usually willing to negotiate on. So, I think it would behoove the town to set up a long-term plan to try to go for that, rather than, unnecessarily put in a capital expenditure at Children's Place. But at least we have that option, at our
Mhm.
fingertips.
Kind of would always need a backup site, I would imagine
Mhm.
anyway, so.
Yeah.
But so I think one of the things that'll be coming relatively soon would be, a site plan
At the DPW.
of the DPW
Mhm.
site of where they expect the plant,
Where
because
exactly?
originally we had the plant all the way on the north end of the property. And because of all this, we moved it south, kind of abutting the transfer station.
So all those
So,
empty spaces behind
Empty
it.
spaces.
so I think this is, where this committee might be very useful, because this goes beyond now just the wastewater, because by shifting the site south, now we don't need to tear down our DPW barn. We will have to do something with our salt shed, But at least for phase one, it looks like, well, you know, this is what our site plan will indicate, you know, whether we can do this or not. But for phase one, we don't necessarily have to remove our underground fuel tanks, our rec building where we sell stickers, or the DPW barn. But planning ahead, one of the, and you'll see in my notes, if you read them, one of the discussions we had, one of my action items was to let GHD know what we might need for our office space. So when you're building a treatment plant, you know, originally they're thinking, we'll just build room for the operators of the treatment plant and maybe some of the water operators. But we changed that up on them a little bit, and we asked them to build some additional administrative office space with the idea that perhaps our DPW administrative staff would also be in that building. So when we get to the point of having to do something about the DPW in the future, we're not building a whole DPW facility, we're just building a garage or a barn, not necessarily the offices.
From a funding standpoint, does that have to be peeled out of the project?
Maybe.
But there's formulas you could do that by, square footage cost.
But,
So
but
that's
there's
right.
no evaluation of that work that would slow down the project. I mean, if they're gonna have to strip out the SF, funding out of that portion of it, it's not gonna slow the
I'm
project.
hoping that it's not so substantial that it's not,
And we did that in water, Fred, each contract, Jackie
I
had to
know, they were
negotiate
very good
that.
about it, but,
Yeah.
you know, we weren't that tight on the deadlines. So I'm
Yeah.
just saying anything that might, you know, more evaluation, more review, because
Mhm.
why you put these offices in there. So I can understand that they might not pay for it.
Right, that's really the only, they won't
But as
stop
far
us
as
from doing.
allowing us to do it, it's really our
money comes
willingness to pay for it.
but what, doing that allows us to keep our facilities on the northern end of the site and not have to deal with those right now and add more cost at this point. And it also, cleans up the construction site, so that they'll have their access to their plant, not have to work around where we're working and where the public might be coming in. So there'll be a totally separate, you know, the hope is once we get the site plan, that makes the ability for the work to be done much more efficiently without having to stage, different routes for different things and work around all those things. So that site plan, when we get that, I think will be a key point for your input because it lends itself to how we phase this out and roll this out.
From a plant design standpoint, can they design the plant? They got enough information as to where the plant's gonna be now, based upon where the beds are? You know,
Yeah.
structurally, are they in the process of design?
Yeah, Lauren's.
Yeah, so in general, yes, we have enough information. Obviously, the spot that we're looking to site the treatment plant now is that, I guess, pit or depression. So we've, focused on putting the treatment plant there as opposed to recharge beds, since it would be fill material and, not existing soil. So we have our surveyors that we've got the contract out and we're looking to get them on board soon. Unfortunately, I don't have a date today, but working to get them out there and then get our soil borings done in that area. So we'll have information on geotech for, what that would look like as far as the structure and foundations for the building. But, it really, our preference was to keep the recharge beds in the general area that they were originally proposed because it had the best perk tests. And again, it's, that native soil that we want to recharge into as opposed to some fill material that would be brought in for that area.
Just so you know, that's on the west side, near the bike path, just south of the DPW building itself.
We haven't really changed those locations.
So that's some of the stuff that's been happening. And then the other thing that I wanted to, the timeline is important and it's great to know that we're on track or not on track and where can we save time. But really, my concern is going into town meeting. We're not gonna have every last detail that we need to have at town meeting, I don't think. However, that doesn't mean we can't plan ahead and can't do stuff. And and I know this is something Kayla's gonna speak to, but a lot of that is outreach and communication. And at least short term for the committee, in my view, was making sure you guys are on board with the why are we doing this discussion. And some really key reasons And Hillary can speak to those. I'm just gonna speak to the money. And that's just what people need to understand is, and we'll get into any level of detail you want in this discussion, but for the town of Eastham, if we individually did this on our own, this is $1 billion price tag over the next 30 years, if everybody was on their own. So what we're trying to do here is to save ultimately taxpayers' money
On
by
their own,
centralized
Right.
treatment.
on their own, you mean everyone put in an IA system?
Right.
And also the annual costs of that would be
Maintenance.
astronomical.
I just
So-
looked at one today that came in on a plan I was reviewing, and I think the annual cost for maintenance on that system was $2,400.
It's
So,
an individual home.
yeah,
And it's just gonna go up when you
That's what we're
got
paying for town
Yeah.
central costs.
yeah, that's one that
tens of
just came in
thousands of people
today.
across Cape Cod having to do this all at the
That
same
is a
time.
racket.
Those
I know.
prices are going up. So
And then for a commercial
I
operation,
wanna
much
invest
more
in
than
that
2,500.
Yeah.
Until you sign to give up the solar.
So I guess that's the key thing I wanted to talk about a little bit today is, the why of this. Obviously, we're doing this for the environment, nitrogen reduction, got a requirement, and we want to make sure you guys understand all those requirements, to the extent you're asked questions. But at the end of the day is, yeah, it's something we need to do. Now, is a question of when might we need to do it? That's a fair question, but I think it's inevitable that we need to do it. And now it's just a matter of cost, and nobody's gonna like the 160 or the 180 or the $200 million price tag that we put at town meeting. But you gotta weigh that in context of, or you could do it yourself, the whole town over the next 30 years, and it'll cost you $1 billion.
So in May of this past year, what year, I forget which May it was, when the design work was authorized, which is already $5 or $7 million.
6, yeah.
Then you had to socialize that to get that through, so
Mhm.
would we not presume that people at least have an inkling that something is happening?
Yes.
$7 million isn't peanuts, right? So they've
No.
already kind of got in their head that we have this project that's in gestation, if you will, and, right? It's not
People
gonna be like
know
a
it's
bolt.
coming, but that doesn't mean
It's
that
still a
they're,
sticker shock.
right,
Yes.
that they're not gonna be like,
Yeah.
oh my God, it's coming now? I
Yeah,
mean, cause
yeah.
we've been putting this off for so
Yeah.
long
Well, the
now.
thing is, once you go to actually do it,
Mhm.
then they start asking all the questions that we've already answered over the past probably 5 to 10 years, if not longer. So, well, I'll just do an IA system, or I know a friend that, sells IA systems up in Maine and it says 100% nitrogen reduction. It's like, yeah, but DEP doesn't permit it or allow it. And, so all those things will start coming out of the woodwork because they keep
Yeah.
focusing on, it's $200 million. And which is no doubt a lot of money, but it's that or this other thing, which is gonna cost you a lot more, and you're on your own on it, by the
And
way.
they're gonna look at the map and go,
Mhm.
okay, if I want to sell if I have to sell my house, like it's involuntary, and I can't because my system fails, and it's not gonna be connected to this for 5 years, then, you know what I mean? Those kinds of questions.
Well,
They're gonna
and the
pop up,
map's
right?
important too, because, I intentionally framed it kind of way I framed it, we could do a community solution, or we could have everybody be on their own.
Right,
The community solution is by far cheaper, but it comes up, I'm sure you had this with the water
Sure.
project too, is,
yeah,
well, if we pay for it through the tax levy, how is that fair, because I'm not connected to it? Well, how is it fair that the people connected to it prevented you from having to put in an expensive IA system? And so there's philosophical discussions that we need to have to make sure we're on the same page as to why we're paying for it the way we pay for it. And I think those are some of the things that, while we're ramping up this timeline and getting all this design done, that maybe we could have some of those discussions.
you said the way we pay for it, the way we pay it, it's really why we've chosen this solution as opposed to another solution.
Right,
That's, underneath that is the
and
solution.
we have sent that out. People don't read these things, I don't think, but we did send that out after the changes of Title V, when the state put the hammer down and said,
Right.
you have to do this, you have to make progress doing this as a community, or else we will punish your residents. That's basically what they said. And we said, we're gonna do it as a community, this is what the plan's gonna look like, this is, so we have pieces of all of these things that have gone out before, and it's like we have to start all over again with some simple messaging that keeps coming at people, so because if they're not gonna get the simple message, or they're not gonna tune into a budget thing, or they're not gonna come to a community meeting. I mean, there's always people at the last minute who are like, I had no idea you were doing
Never
this.
heard of it, yeah.
Yeah. So, but that's why I gave you the timeline, because the stuff, the communication pieces that we're pulling off as to why they're on the timeline. I mean, basically,
So the website goes live when?
So we were kind of waiting just for a little bit more information. So Hillary had her bit of health.
We had a workshop at the
Right.
Board of Health
Which
that,
people already talked to me about at the part-time level. I
Isn't that
I heard
good?
about that 4 months ago.
okay, good, yeah, because we worked with,
they're more in touch.
those
than
folks to get info out to your membership, because it's important to include residents, part-time residents in all of these discussions and to keep them knowledgeable. So I think, there were more people in this room than I was expecting, which surprised me. So I think there was good turnout. We got some good information out. It solicited questions coming in, which is great. And so that will go up on the website with some of these documents, just to sort of refocus people on, these are the options. We did show them the map of phase 1 and phase 2, so that they had some idea. And then what I can't recall if we talked about in one of the scenarios that you described, sort of, is the administrative consent order that the Board of Health will roll out in a regulation package, so that folks that are in phase 1 have an option to, you know, sign up for the sewer, because if it goes by your house, you have to hook up, and not waste money upgrading their
On something
septic
on their
system
own.
that they're not gonna
Right,
use in
right.
the next 5 to 10 years. So
And that's a question, Hillary, that we get all the time is, oh my God, well,
Yes.
what if my system fails before you're ready
Right, hook
to
up.
connect it? And that's where the Board of Health comes in.
right, so we would, you know, remedy their system to have it functioning enough to get us through that
Whatever
time
the lag
period.
is.
Yeah, because, you know, what I've learned over time is people don't like to waste money, and they don't want to spend
Yep.
money twice.
Correct.
So we hear that loud and clear.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess to recap that, so I did this little FAQ
Right.
based on that hearing.
Based on the meeting event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Just to let
so,
people know if they
So if
missed
you've already
it.
put the map out at that meeting, then it should be on the website, right?
yeah, so we decided, was it yesterday or?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it hasn't changed significantly, right? Jackie, you'll let us know if you make any changes to the map.
Right.
ASAP, okay.
People always go to the visual.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see.
Where am I?
Well, that's what's hard on this. I think you do this intentionally, I know you do. But you can,
And we did talk about, so we have in the background like a GIS map where someone can log in and type in their address and it would pull it up instead of just a PDF.
Mhm.
Mhm. That would be cool.
can you send that to me, Jackie?
Yeah.
And this has a link to the actual meeting if someone wants to go back and watch it too.
Yeah, it will. This is the flyer.
Mhm.
So, well, it's almost done, but this is like what Hillary can have in her office or we can pass out, but there is gonna be the constant contact.
That's our flash thing.
That's the flash, and that will have the meeting embedded into it and then redirect them to the website. So these two will go out by the end of the week. We have a very basic projects page now that covers wastewater and it has like the most important documents, but we're gonna have a page dedicated to wastewater. They'll be on the home page. So you just click on, bring you right to it, and it will, this week will have why we're doing this. This information on cesspools, Title V, IAs, and the video and the maps, kind of information on phase 1.
And we can, I mean, there is all kinds of historical data on, by historical, I mean from like 2008 forward on the health website now.
Mhm.
If people wanted to go back, I don't know how many hits we have on those types of things, but it goes into our 208 updates and.
I don't think many people are going
No.
back. I think most folks understand what the problem is and what we're trying to solve. That being said, I think we need to continue to drum that up so that it's, you know, clear as day.
But I'm looking at,
And that it's a legal issue. It's not just, it's an
Right.
environmental issue, as Rich said, it's now a legal issue. We have entered into agreements to do this.
Sure, me.
And we've
Mhm.
entered into an agreement with Orleans to have a watershed permit that says that both towns are working on
Got it.
a solution.
So I'm looking at where they are required now, 4 bullets. Is it possible to come up with the houses? I mean, I see the bullets and I'm like, where's that geography? Is it possible to come up with actually even down to addressing? So people
So
know?
you're looking at where the IA systems are
Yeah,
currently required.
currently required.
So
In case something fails and they go, oh,
it's a little dicey, and what we told folks was to just reach out to us because some of the wetland resources don't appear on the maps, that we don't have a fine, precise delineation of each property.
okay.
So I had a gentleman reach out to me, this week or last week, and he asked about his property, and he is right on the edge. So the online mapping, both the towns and the mass mapper, showed just the tiniest corner of his property being within an environmentally sensitive lot. And so I explained that to him, but some of the properties are so close that they need a site survey to determine
Determine.
if they're in or they're out. So we can give them a good idea. It's not 100%.
So does it then have to be on the website to prompt people to reach out to you?
Yes, that's what I would tell
Very
someone.
clearly, if you have questions, call or
Yes.
email or
Yes.
something.
Now, as we move forward and we have and if this passes through
Right.
town meeting and we have an area and we have a delineated area, then EPG will do maps for us that are interactive, that people can go on. We had address lists for water. We had all of that information. So you could go look up your address and you could tell whether you needed to, whether you were in the mandatory area or not. And, or when water would get to you, because it was a 10-year project, right? So,
Mm.
and we'll do, I'm sure, something similar.
Cause it's like three categories of questions. My system failed.
Mhm.
I have to do something first thing yesterday. What zone am I in?
Yeah.
Or I'm thinking about doing a project on in my property that's gonna require another bathroom. Where am I? And what zone am I in? So there's like 2 levels of questions.
Yeah.
There's the emergency and there's what I'd like to do question.
And we don't care about bathrooms, just for the record, we only care about bedrooms.
You know, that's okay. So
Yeah,
another
but it's
bedroom.
building expansion. We
Yeah.
care about building expansion.
And then the third level we always heard during water is, my water's fine, my Title V system's fine, everything's
Leave
fine.
me alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's common also.
That's the third
IA
level of
systems-
passion.
Gorilla in the room all the time.
Yeah,
The IA systems are still gonna be required in all these environmentally sensitive areas.
mhm. But that's the
Even-
current
even-
regulation. Yeah,
Right.
that's current Board of Health regulation.
So I think where it
And the
gets,
well
where it
fee.
gets dicey is where
Mhm.
something failed and you go, okay, in 3 years, this sewer line is gonna pass by your house, but what do I do?
Yeah, that's where the administrative consent order would come in, because we don't want people spending their money twice. And I think we're just gonna have to engage with the public and have these conversations. So, I mean, over and over and over again.
I mean, literally, we called every single residence in the mandatory area, like 412 homes.
Okay.
We split up the 412 homes and someone from Eastham
Oh,
called
wow.
them.
And did you actually have conversations? Did you miss people with voicemail? I'm just
No,
thinking of
we had
people who go,
conversations.
I didn't hear
or
about this and then,
Or people called us back.
okay.
And we got everybody but 19, and then it went down to like, 9. Now it's down
I'm
to.
about to turn one of them.
Or
Couple holdouts.
But I think we do
And
have
the
to start
consent
talking
request.
about,
Most of them
doing
are-
some kind
Most-
of live
all of them.
outreach
Yep.
in January sometime.
How many votes do we need at town meeting to get this through?
Well, we don't know what the quorum is until right
No,
before town meeting, but
2/3.
The 2/3
last
vote?
year, the
2/3.
quorum was 225, and it's definitely 2/3. vote.
So-
Was there 400 in the mandatory area?
For water, for
For
this,
wastewater.
I don't know yet. I don't remember
Isn't the
that.
mandatory area in the target for phase one?
You called 412 of those,
Okay.
so I mean, you just said 412, right? So,
But that was for water.
That was
That was
for
oh,
water.
I'm sorry, okay.
Yeah, Jackie, you might know how many properties are in the green.
Around 500.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any business, and how many businesses in the green?
A lot.
And we assume that, because they don't
Well,
actually
a
have a
lot
vote for
recently.
Sandwich, they're also a resident, but they're clearly gonna be a yes, because their cost to do individual systems will be.
But they're, on the flip side though, to play devil's advocate, there are gonna be people in the green who will not wanna hook up to septic.
Hmm.
Because we had people that didn't wanna hook up to water, so.
But if the sewer goes by, Title V says you have 60 days to hook up. So there's no negotiating on a sewer.
And I
But
appreciate.
knowing the people in this town, they're gonna say, so what are you gonna do to me?
It's not really about us, it's really about DEP.
Now, so
We've been down this road.
Yeah, for sure.
If it goes by the business, they have to hook up too, they can't,
Yeah.
like the.
Like the
hotel
woman-
said, no.
There's a lady in the
They won't
water
be able to
mandatory
do
area,
that.
she's not hooked up.
No.
And we definitely need
Well,
them.
matter of fact. I think I'm short up this, Hillary. If they are required to hook up to sewer, they will also be required to have a water.
Right,
Oh,
how are you gonna bill them?
that's how you measure it.
So is it possible to,
I
talking
don't
about
know.
marketing here a little bit,
Well, the building's basically-
design a campaign that if we look at the sort of average number of people that come to town meeting, it's gonna be a special, but it's not gonna be a special, it's gonna be a regular, right?
We're gonna shoot for a regular, we could
Right.
do it in a special.
But if we target our resources at the people we think we can get a successful vote out of and get the 2/3 we want that way, that wouldn't be a bad way of going about it, rather than just try to do a scatter approach for everybody in the town who is not necessarily gonna be affected.
Well, I think that's
Let's start
where
out
this
there.
committee comes in, we gotta put a plan together, we gotta start following through on it, we gotta get you the information. We'll do our outreach, but you guys are the community, so people come ask you questions, that's why we gotta,
So of the towns that have successfully done this now and in the past, have any of them engaged any marketing teams to help them with it?
Orleans, had their OPM did their marketing campaign,
Listen,
interestingly enough. And I don't know if they hired, I can find out though, I'm gonna have a meeting with Orleans tomorrow, so I can ask that question. I think whether they brought in someone, I did
or
put,
Chatham or.
we have a little budget in the, design and
I remember that, it
engineering
was in there, yeah.
phase for some marketing and outreach. Because I think we should, I know this is old fashioned, but I do think we should at least do one mailing to everybody.
And we also did talk about doing print ads.
Yeah.
Briefly in the, meeting we had, kind of highlighting some people in the community that will support the project and that people know, and maybe a business owner, maybe a fisherman, and kind of like testimonial ads on why wastewater is important, and hit it from all different areas. And when I've done print ads, like testimonial ads in the past, they've worked really well.
Yeah.
we had a whole bunch of, three questions, right? My experience hasn't been that great with the outsourcing of that.
No.
In both Yarmouth was involved in Dennis and Harwich. When you outsource it, they don't, you're not a trustworthy source.
Yeah.
Right, you're not
Even
a
if you
local.
are, You're not a local. It's much better that they're hearing it from us, whether they want to believe us or not, but.
It's
Um,
true.
And I'm sorry,
Yeah.
the two of you on the screen, the engineers are the worst presenters.
Yeah.
So. You guys need to be there for the technical answers.
As engineers,
I'm gonna
so
say,
you
I beg
are
to
lovely.
differ.
We had one meeting in Yarmouth that the engineer was like the lead, and that was the first and last time. They always had small bits, but never were the lead again.
And Dennis just had a pretty successful recent try. We've been looking at some of their materials. Kayla's been looking at some of their materials. And they are really honestly the cheapest town on Cape Cod. So if they voted for it, we can do it.
Good saying that in front of us.
They're proud of that. They're very proud.
But one of the things I think was one of the more effective things in Yarmouth was we did short videos and they had different types. I'm just throwing this out there, you guys can think about it, but one of the effective ones is we had people from our Water Resource Advisory Committee that we'd kind of interview them and we, mash up the interview with the,
Cut it up.
the snippets.
Yeah,
And then we had people from the Chamber of Commerce, we talked to them, we had a couple of business owners. We made these, videos that were really effective, I think, about, getting the message out. And again, your local people in town that people know, you're more inclined to listen to
what about
them.
the high school students?
Lower Cape TV will do something for us.
Mhm.
So you can, I used to walk around with my phone and just do simple videos on the phone.
Dennis did the videos as well. They had, what was it, like wastewater Wednesday or?
Oh, yeah, they did wastewater Wednesday, and so they had something go out every Wednesday.
That's actually one thing, to make it a regular thing, so it's like hard to ignore it or avoid it, because you might miss one of them, but you won't miss like 4 in a row.
Although I almost wonder if it's overkill. I live in Dennis and I only say this because I think I watched 2 or 3 of them. And I was sort of like overrun with too much information in a sense.
And we get that comment too from the flashes. People will unsubscribe.
If it's
which
too
is very
much.
bad.
I
Oh,
do
well,
think
okay.
We have to
nice
balance it.
To give different
Yeah.
options for people, whether it's a video, whether it's a podcast, it's
And
print,
putting it
digital.
on, everything we do on Facebook, the print
Mhm,
ads, I think, like if we're having a public meeting too, a print ad might be a good time to.
Yeah, it just, we have to be diverse in the way we're gonna do it, so it targets everyone, not just people on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
The QR codes are good.
Mhm.
Even I can use one of those.
Yep, I like that.
It's lost in the shuffle a lot, but the environmental benefit
Yeah,
kind of underlying the whole thing.
absolutely.
Correct.
We
We gotta go back to that. Yeah,
So that is
that's what I said. We gotta keep drumming that up.
So that's a group though that we have not woken up
Right,
at all. Like we haven't included them in anything. We haven't reached out to open space or any of those, the CONSCOM, any of
Come on
those
board.
committees that could really get us into some of the organizations that might help us because we're going to need the environmentalists as well, not
Well,
just.
I'm real close to them.
I know.
I'll see them tonight. I can,
Yeah, they're the ones passionate, right?
yeah, oh, very, yeah.
I gotta think that helped in Dennis, because Dennis has a real strong.
Yeah.
Conservation trust and
Mm-hmm,
community.
We can work that angle pretty easily.
So I'm a little concerned about the, how accurate does the price tag that you go to town meeting with have to be? Because we're gonna be going in there with a 30% plan estimate. That's like the value engineering on which is gonna be done the day before the warrant has to go to the printer, so.
Again, a good conversation for this committee. How do you want to approach this, right? I mean,
Because the,
some towns want to go all in, get everything all up front, and then you're done, but you run the risk that you didn't ask for enough.
Yeah.
Some towns piece part it together, and something this magnitude, maybe we do that. Or
it's hard
maybe,
for us though, because we have to do the treatment plant in phase 1, so it's not like we can put it off.
Right.
We only have one collection system and one treatment plant, but. So the way the schedule works is we go this May to ask for an amount of money. Then we go through the whole SRF process.
Right.
Next January, they'll assign the money. Then the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund will assign the
Right.
money, and then we'll go out to bid. And then we'll have an exact amount right in time to go back to town meeting if we need to.
yeah, that's kind of the
That's
problem,
the,
is this estimate.
You can't do SRF without,
You
you can't
can't
give
go,
them, you can't give them a maybe or a partial. You have to
no,
give
you have to be authorized, like the first question they wanna know is, did town meeting authorize this?
And if
And
they don't,
because they don't want us, they don't wanna go through the whole process
Right, and then have
if the
to-
town hasn't said yes, so we have to go to town meeting to get the authorization. And we try to get the whole amount. Now, don't think there have been many towns that have had to get the extra. Orleans was one of them. I think Mashpee had to go back.
Mhm.
The second town meeting, just for a tweak.
Or did,
Harwich did,
yeah,
yeah.
but that's the problem in this bid environment, and, Lauren, I don't
Yeah.
know, you have a different experience, but just the last several years, the bid environment's just terrible, and,
Yeah,
a lot
yeah.
of estimating's been quite a bit off.
Yeah.
And, you know,
And the other thing that I'm concerned about, and I know I shouldn't be yet, but, you know, if we get into a situation where and tariffs are imposed, then this, all the materials that are like gold now, that are like diamonds now, that we can't get enough of because everyone's doing it, are gonna then, you know, jump in
Supply
price
chain
again.
another level.
Mhm.
So I think there are gonna be some tricky factors, but I think we just have to, that's why that May number has to be a good number. It has to have some excess in it. It can't be a tight number.
Yeah, we definitely have people that are in tune with some of the, you know, things affecting the bidding environment. So we'll be able to put in some contingencies for that. And then what was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, the other options that we could have would be to do some type of bid alternates so that you don't necessarily, like if it ends up, if the bids come crazy high or something like that, you know, we can set up the bid so that there's certain items that you don't have to go forward with to be able to move the project forward overall. And then, you know, do those things later, or maybe those were things that were more, you know, phase 2 related anyway. So that is another way we can set it up as a second, you know, backup for.
Oh, and Yankee, that's fair, because I think, you know, we're not gonna build everything in the first year anyway, so it's gonna have to be
Right.
spread out over 2 or 3 years anyway,
Mhm.
So you
It's
typically,
important not to make promises at town meeting. I learned that, I don't know, 30 years ago.
well, I can imagine the collection system is likely at least several contracts, separate contracts. There's not gonna, like, it's gonna be one contract for the whole collection system all at once, right?
right,
So, you know, that, and that, those contracts can change from, you know, bids change from contract to contract.
right,
Um,
but what, but the first town meeting, the one in 25. How do you typically do it? Do you go in with a number,
Yeah, with a number,
200 million, whatever, or 100?
yes.
So, and then you don't wanna have to crawl back and ask for more.
No, we don't, but we
But you
can.
only have 30% complete plans at that point, so.
We can, and I think that the thing is, if we have to go back, it'll be with an absolute specific number. And there'll be a reason why,
You have it all
and,
documented and where it went.
and they've already said yes. So, I mean, I think it's easier, but I don't know what Orleans's process was. I think they kind of failed the first round, and then they split it up into pieces. A lot of pieces, and they're still splitting it up into pieces, but
They're not voting on each piece, the town meeting, no,
yeah, they are,
they are.
yeah. They're funding each piece,
2/3 each time?
2/3 each time we borrow, yeah.
The first one's
It really is.
so,
Plus,
if, I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer here, but if we don't get it through this May.
Yeah.
What does that do to our 0% and all the rest of the goodies that we want to have here?
I think the first thing we would do is decide whether we're gonna have a special fall meeting and try again, right? Because we
Right,
could
but
still
are we gonna miss
salvage
that? Are we gonna
everything.
are we gonna miss the 0%?
No, I don't think so.
The 25%?
Not if we can get it in the same year, or even, I mean, we may still be fine if we get it in 2026, but we
That
don't
is the
know.
risk, you know, we go out beyond an extra year from this. The 0% is key critical.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's absolutely,
And the 25%.
you're still required to do it.
Pretty
It's
critical.
unaffordable when you add, you know,
Even 2%.
For our little town, it's unaffordable.
and then, you know,
And
then you put at risk the
it's something
25%.
we need to be open about. I mean,
right now we
Yes.
got a
water's a great
25%.
example of how we kick the can down the road. It costs us big time.
Right now, we have a 25% subsidy from the Water Protection Trust that we know is there. It might not,
Regardless of whether we
might
win
not,
or lose at the town meeting.
No,
but no,
No.
but might not be
Contin-
there in future
contingent.
years because they're running out of money, because this is my biggest fear, is everybody on Cape Cod has to
It's
go
going
through
to them
this.
for money.
Mhm.
yeah.
And I'd rather be at the front of the trough instead of the end of the trough. And
Right now,
I
it looks
think
like
that-
we're kind of in the middle.
And that
Yeah, right.
impacts the bid environment, because if you got, you know, all the towns on Cape Cod trying to use the same 3, 4, 5
Contractors.
vendors.
Yeah.
They're gonna get a premium on the extra work that they're taking on.
And the people that are connecting your house to the system are gonna be horribly busy too.
No pun intended.
Rich, what's the loan duration that you're figuring out?
Unfortunately, they're only going up to 30 years.
30 years?
There was a, piece of legislation that was asking to get 40, because some infrastructure is 40. Federally, we can go to 40, but that didn't pass through the,
And I think that was schools too.
it was just schools.
Schools.
Well, wastewater should last longer than school.
But,
So-
There's some things that last a long time, but there's, certain things like pumps that will need to be replaced, 20 to
Well-
30 years, they need to get replaced or refurbished.
But
Depending.
building a whole plant. so,
Right, exactly. You're not replacing the structure.
no, hopefully not, ever.
I'll be dead.
That's one of the arguments. So it's-
Right.
It is, that's,
It's
Fred
true.
and I came up with that Friday, that's gonna be one of the arguments,
It's
but I'll be
true.
dead in 5
I'll be
years. so
dead,
don't-
yeah.
Should I pay for it now?
Yeah.
Sometime, yes.
Uh,
So we're gonna send you guys the long version of the schedule.
Mhm.
Can I ask a favor on the schedule, this, so, I don't know about you guys, but I like to see some things in a linear critical timeline, so, where the critical timelines and maybe some kind of a drop down that what contributes to that. So that sheet you showed, Lauren, was great, it has a lot of detail, but I might get confused in it. If I can see things we really need to know, what the dates are, that, to me, that
Yeah.
top sheet, that's an important piece.
The top,
I
yeah,
can-
like a cover synopsis of it with the
Yeah.
high points. The other thing that we were talking about Friday that I think is gonna be important is, we learned during the water process that there were critical decision points that the CPC committee really had to make decisions, right? Make decisions and vote on decisions. And we need to sort of sit down with Jackie and Lauren. I think staff needs to sit down with Jackie and Lauren and figure out where some of those points are gonna be for us. I mean, clearly, once we get that 30% design and we've got some cost estimates, that's a decision point. But there are lots of them as we move along, and they come in kind of clumps.
To answer Fred's question on the CPM schedule, you can give us the detailed CPM schedule, but you can do a summary schedule. It can be condensed also.
Yeah, that's right.
Correct.
And even if you could link them two together, it'd be wonderful. If I could click on one and drop down and see what makes up that.
It may not, it may. do
So
that for you,
yeah, because I
but-
have it in Microsoft Project, so I'm not sure that, everyone else would be able to open it, but I can PDF it in the condensed version for those who want to look at it that way, and then I can uncondense the ones that people want to look at. The other thing I can do, obviously, it does show the dependencies in the visual part of it, but I can show the predecessors that I've used for, that line. I usually hide that when I share a schedule with somebody, but I can put that so you can go like, okay, line 15 relates to line 16. So I can show that if that would be helpful.
It's a very critical timeline.
I prefer the detail myself, but.
Okay. I can do both.
Thank you, Lauren.
You're welcome. I'll make it as big as I usually
It's-
print it out tabloid, which
And
is
we
usually it's
like
not
it
too
on
bad.
big paper.
We can all read it.
I take it electronically. It's fine with me.
Okay. Then you can zoom in, at least with the PDF, like I showed, like you can zoom in to make it bigger for easy on the screen.
And I imagine that will be in our shared drive once it's up and running.
Yes, yes.
And so they're busy working out. They're both of their components. We're gonna be having one more meeting next week and then take a break for the holiday, Lauren, and then come back January.
Mhm.
Yep.
And so our next meeting, the CPC next meeting would be, it looks like the 14th. Do we meet the second Tuesday? Yeah, so the 14th. And let's So in the meantime, I'm gonna really do this. If we meet the 14th, next week, you'll get something from Rich that a synopsis of that meeting,
A synopsis of the Tuesday
of the
meeting.
weekly meeting.
Next
yeah.
week's.
That like, just these minutes, right?
Yeah,
That's from
These are
GHD.
great, by the way, Rich, thank you.
okay, good.
Those
So-
are the ones from GHD.
That's
Yeah,
GHD,
so
and
we'll
then
get
it
the
does these other
GHD
ones.
ones and then you'll get some rich notes as well. And then Kayla's gonna send you anything that we send out to the public. She'll email you, CC you in that and tell you where it is too, in case you wanna find it. And we should have this one plus maybe one more before your next meeting.
Do you have a click counter on the website? Do you have a click counter, a views counter? We had it for a while,
We did,
This website does not have analytics,
oh,
which is kind of, I've always liked analytics. We can work on getting it.
something.
yeah, we had it in the water site.
Yeah, that was, so the water site wasn't through our town site,
Oh,
um,
yeah.
so it was different.
The-
But we can try to work something out.
Mhm. I don't think it's an expensive piece of software.
No, it's just,
ADD set up that.
Right.
water website.
it's easy as putting Google Analytics on it and just.
And we'll look at the budget and see if we need to.
I don't think it's expensive.
When we get into that whole market, it'd be interesting to see how many people are actually looking at it or getting tired of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, how many people are opening it?
I can see analytics for the flashes we send,
Yeah.
so that's really helpful.
Yeah, and those are
Um,
pretty good. I like to look at that.
Yeah.
But I do notice if we send too much stuff, we start getting people unenrolling, which is very discouraging.
It is.
We get like 6 new people and then we lose like 7 people.
So Jerry, is the select board planning to have any public hearings on this whole thing? Not to put you on the spot here, but,
So on this, well, there clearly has to be some
right,
public hearing on it.
but sort of
Because
an informational thing.
Yeah.
informational public hearing, yeah. I mean, it's not a select board decision in a sense. I mean, it'll be on the warrant, likely a select
Right.
board
Somebody's
warrant.
gonna,
But it's
move
the town has to
Right.
to approve or not approve. And
Could do it in the context of like a work session with them, but I'm not sure how many people, I mean,
I don't know.
it surprises me that people do tune in
Yeah.
to our meetings.
Would show
No.
up here.
But if we definitely, what we would do is if we have a public forum, obviously we'd invite the board to that, right? So,
I do think.
it'll be, you have to get public buy-in on
Mhm.
this,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
the
well,
board
they
is,
elected you guys,
board's
so-
behind that, so.
Yeah.
but definitely once we get the 30% and we get a honing in on the cost, we'll definitely have to present that to the
Mhm.
select board.
It's so last minute though, it's gonna be tough,
Right,
Very
yeah.
tight.
because that 30% is in March.
January.
Anyway.
Something about the 30%.
Well, we'll get it.
30%
We'll
is
get it.
design is March, but we are still striving to get an updated schedule because we'll have, we're already reached out to the equipment suppliers for some of the treatment plant processes. We'll have a better handle on the amount of tanks that we're going to need. So we'll be able to, have some ballpark costs that are a little bit more specific than they were in July.
And if we start to get data in January, then that will develop over time, but we'll be ready to talk about it. We'll have a ballpark. We might not come up with a total number, but by,
We'll have,
Well, plus the design team will contain a design contingency specifically for their design also. That won't be any contingencies beyond that, those will be other contingencies, but they carry their own design contingency at those early points. And as their design goes, that contingency drops. in
smaller.
percentage, it's smaller.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's concern, but
yeah,
there should be funds that would.
because that's gonna
What
be,
kind of percentage are we
it's gonna be the
talking
number one question.
oh my
at
God,
these
they
meetings,
carried
is how much is it
30% in
gonna
the
cost?
first estimate. It was a 30% contingency. That's what made me lose my
That's
mind.
pretty typical for like a
You thought it was gonna
5%
go up, not down, right?
conceptual design.
I know, but I'm just saying,
But yeah, I can understand it being shocking.
to say that big number out loud for the first time and then
But that included the contingency.
it did, but it's not going down.
No.
I noticed that
Never-
we're still with the big
It
number.
hardly ever does,
Oh.
but it was good that that contingency was in there as much.
Yes.
Imagine if we started 30% lower, yeah. If there, is everything proceeding based on including the yellow and the green, on the plan,
The yellow
In
is the
phase
outer.
one.
extent.
It's still gonna be, it's included in your flows and loads or no, Jackie? Yellow, on our map, we have mostly green and then we have some yellow areas that are like, if we're doing this, maybe we need to
Well, the big-
expand into
big
there.
one is the northeast end corridor.
Yeah, the commercial corridor.
That's
Well,
in,
most of
that's
that
in
is in
yellow.
the green now.
Most in the green, it's
It
just
is?
some of the top.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely that north yellow,
all
we
this,
definitely wanna do.
right, so.
Right, yeah, so
Is everybody working on that?
Yep, we're working on
No,
it.
I think-
Jackie's working on
I
it.
think that's been agreed, that was
That's
the
what we want.
phase one.
Okay,
It was phase one, but it was prioritized, and Jackie can correct me if I'm wrong, but prioritized to make sure we were addressing the parcels in the nitrogen removal areas.
Yeah.
So it was prioritizing that for the most part.
So yellow is phase one maximum.
and that's what these numbers,
That's what we're
they're
still-
working on.
Yeah.
And the green's the minimum required.
Right, I
To address the
understand.
nitrogen.
The dark
Want to make sure that.
But you're gonna
Yeah.
get a lot of your flow
was
from
gonna
the
be
yellow.
The dark green, then
You're gonna
there's
get a lot of flow
the
from the
second
yellow.
column.
Of course, yeah.
Right.
Well, I
Help pay for the
I priced it
plant.
out, and, I don't have the numbers of the construction, final numbers, but when I do, I'll do that, but to your point, Fred, because of the flow, and then of course it depends on what you charge for a rate, but you're picking up, the biggest cost of this isn't really the construction of the plant. Everybody focuses on the 150, the $200 million. It's the annual costs that recur forever.
Mhm.
And so if you get more flow and you can charge for that, that offsets that annually recurring costs. And actually over a 30-year life or a 50-year life, it evens it out so that it's not any more expensive to do that than it is to not do it.
I'm a little confused. The design of the plant currently that's gonna be developed is including the dark green, the light green, and the yellow.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna get out to you the schedule, a synopsis of the next meeting, Kayla's splashes or outreaches or whatever we're calling them, and meet again on the 14th.
That's one question on the flows that were discussed. Last I left off was 2 months ago. We had one designer here, one designer there. How did they reconcile to come to the right number?
Very well and very comfortably. It
Okay.
just took a little bit, didn't it, Jackie? How did you reconcile the flows and loads?
And where did you land?
Yeah,
I don't know if I would call it reconcile, because we were pretty much on the same page, but I think at the GHD stage, they were really working with old data, preliminary design. So then now that we had a lot more years, because I think, obviously when they started the design, it was like 2017, 2018, so the water system just came out. They only had a couple years, and we found it was a really good estimate. And then essentially what we did, Lauren and I went back and forth, is we looked at every single parcel individually rather than estimating based on land use or type or anything like that. So we have an Excel that has a number assigned to every single parcel. So if it has water usage, we have that real billing data from the usage in a reasonable average. If it doesn't have usage, say it's a single family, we use actual usage to estimate that. And then if it's nothing and it could be developed, we also assigned a value to that. So I think it was more like a different approach. And then understanding what I think the water usage data means, because in theory, you would get somebody's bill, but it doesn't exactly correspond to that, if that makes any sense. Or I don't know how to explain it without making sense, but I mean, I've pretty much reviewed every single water application in town, so I know that a lot of that data, you can't just take it and, oh, this is a real number. Between like the meters that we used, the leaks that we had, the reissues of bills. So I included all of that. And I think there was a lot of difference in condos, things like that, shared meters that changed the numbers a lot.
What did you end up with the flow rate?
For phase one, 140,000 gallons just on water usage. And then for wastewater, we take 90% of that. And that's what Lauren's latest memo was taking that 90%, looking at infiltration and inflow. And then we've been kind of reassessing that growth number. So originally it was like the 26% from the Cape Cod Commission planning tool, which doesn't necessarily exist anymore. And I think the way, and Lauren might be able to explain it better, but the way we got the water usage data and that even if it's able to be developed, so we put real numbers on tea time. So there's no guess, like every parcel has a value assigned to it. And that growth factor is just normal increase that you would see. It'd be a smaller number for single family because that's not really going to grow. And then we kind of came up with a generic 15% to take into account the rezoning and redevelopment of Route 6.
And that's one thing that EPG has now that GHD did not have at the beginning of this process was what is the zoning gonna do in that district? And that's what we were nervous about because you know, we don't want to intensify the use that much, but we do need some excess capacity for that to go on.
Rich, do you have to nail down the operating costs prior to the town meeting? You know,
But, you know, we have, I'm working with, you know, theoretical estimates just to try to plan ahead a little bit, but.
plus you can get data from other
I
towns.
was just gonna say other towns, you could sort of extrapolate.
And there is a wastewater managers group that started meeting recently. We had one meeting already, so we can glean some good information from them also.
And if all goes to plan, this goes live in 29?
2029 sometime.
So,
Yeah.
and what's the
Think
ramp
so.
up period on, typically on connections from that? So let's say we've got 400, is that a
500.
good number, 400 or 500? The ramp up for that has historically been in other towns.
I don't
I mean,
know.
I still see people
What's our
connecting, like the
construction
bird
period?
watcher storage
Yeah.
is connected over.
18 months for the plant and then another year.
No, for the, I'm
Yeah,
talking
but then
about
what
for
she's saying is
operating
then-
costs.
Hookup.
Then to, how do we calculate how long it will take for 500 homes to get hooked up to the system? Probably,
And what's that, how's that reflect in the operating costs of the plant?
exactly. Well,
I
you
mean,
have
there's
to
some
not
fixed
count
component
any
of it, right?
costs,
And
I
then there's a
guess.
variable.
So this is why,
No revenue for a couple
Right.
of
this
years.
is finance committee business now, but this is why every year, the finance committee for the last several years, we've had this discussion. And this is exactly why I've been so adamant about not spending the short-term rental receipts and so sucking it into the operating budget.
Yeah.
Because the amount that those short-term receipts that we get in a prior year become free cash. And then every year for the last 3 years, so this will be our fourth coming up, I think.
Mhm.
We take that amount of free cash and put it in a wastewater stabilization fund. Cause you're absolutely right, we're gonna have the full boat of operating costs, but not the full boat of revenue coming
Right,
in
right.
in the first year or two of a
I mean, the
treatment.
variable component will be small, but the fixed portion.
So the stabilization fund is meant to give us some cash infusion at the beginning, because all treatment plants are cash poor at the beginning.
I knew we had to break it.
Thank you so much for listening to our process, guys.
Hey, one small
Oh, one more
question.
question.
There's a references to a growth neutral bylaws that have to be,
Mhm.
That's Hillary.
what's that?
In order
You're
to
entitled,
receive the SRF funding, we have to ensure that we'll be growth neutral, so we won't increase flow from properties beyond what it is now. There's a little bit of wiggle room that we'll have, like in Northeastham, we have some flow allocated there. And then you get into these sewer regulations that say how you're gonna allocate flow within your system. But the growth neutral bylaw essentially says we're not going to increase our growth beyond what's here.
In terms of actual property development,
And that takes in to
Yeah, but it includes-
downtown center.
I was gonna say, but.
Yes, we had
It
to,
presumes there's.
yeah, we had to allocate flow to that because we know that's something that we want to develop
But
now.
the bottom line is, just because we have a sewer system doesn't mean we can suddenly get,
Do all
high-rise
kinds of-
buildings
yeah,
all along
exactly.
Route 6
No,
Right,
and fill them up with
And that will-
bedrooms.
and the Board of Health will enforce that, right?
So we could do it in Board of Health, we can do it in planning and zoning. We don't have a home for it yet because
Yeah.
we're still talking about it.
But it's a requirement for.
Yeah.
charter.
So when you go to get a permit,
Yeah.
you're not necessarily gonna be able to build whatever you want, you're gonna have to.
Correct. And we look at that now anyway.
Sorry, I'm not on the committee, but, okay, we're gonna start a program, try and get people to switch from short-term to long-term rentals. Okay, that's gonna increase flow.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, because the systems are all designed for year-round use. So when you design a system, when you look at sewer flow numbers, we're gonna look at year-round use.
And
Okay, so-
27 people go to that 4-bedroom house in Stanford, where,
I
only
understand.
6 people live in it
I-
year round.
I understand, but, okay, so the numbers are, if a home is used only seasonally,
Mhm.
you're still, on your flows, you're assuming it's full-time resident. over
Full-time.
12 months. Is that right?
Sorry, I don't know if you guys are looking at us or, or internally.
You're supposed to.
It's on the side.
Shaking your head a little bit, up and down, so we thought it was a yes.
Yeah, and so I mean, and it even varies from, yeah, the seasonal use. I know Jackie looked at that, and that's why there is some contingent or some growth factors on those properties to make sure that we're, addressing that. I mean, it's still one lawn. There's not necessarily going to be like watering it more because there's a long-term rental there.
And I also, I don't know how many people were actually turning from taking their short-term rental and turning it into a year-round rental. I think that we have folks that want to rent year-round and we have folks that definitely only are interested in short-term.
Yeah,
And if
but-
we're that successful, it'll be awesome.
Yeah,
We'll have to say, we cannot
Yeah.
convert any
trying.
more houses.
yeah, no, we're trying. And we're seeing the data. We're gonna see more data, in the next month or so. So,
But we're trying things
yes,
to grow more.
year-round, yes.
Year-round residents,
Oh.
and we're talking about a bylaw that says no growth.
Well,
So that's the only reason I raised the question.
It
Yeah.
basically says that we're going to pace our growth so it does not do anything horrible to the environment. It doesn't say, so this isn't a ticket to wild new growth, and it isn't a total
Ban.
a
Ban.
ban on new
Okay.
growth. It's just a responsible plan so that we don't, 50 years from now, we're not in the same scenario where, we have a tiny little sewer system and we've polluted now 3 more parts of the town.
I understand. You answered my question. I won't cause any trouble with the select.
No, it's that question.
The state will let you anyway. That's
Right.
up to you,
No, they won't give us
Neutral
money.
growth.
They
Yeah.
won't give us help. Are we good?
so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're saying
welcome.
goodbye to you now.
Bye.